So an honor to share today's service with you as always. And as I mentioned in the advertising, I've been inspired by two events for today's service. The first one, as I mentioned, is this book. We'll be touching on it a little later. If you haven't read it, I would urge you to try and get your hands on a copy. It is part autobiography, part deep reflection, and part cultural and sociological and spiritual reflection of a beautiful young African-American poet and writer and her journey, which she takes us on through these 15 chapters. So I'm going to be sharing with you the bookends. I felt there were so many to choose from, and I thought, how on earth do I do that? So I thought, you know what, I'll just start with the first and end with the last. And these are the chapter names, just to whet your appetite. In order: dignity, place, wonder, calling, body, belonging, fear, lament, rage, justice, repair, rest, joy, memory, and the last chapter, liberation. So I will be dipping into the first chapter named Dignity, but I wanted to also tie in the second event that inspired me today. I've met some amazing people, as I think you've probably realized in what I've shared, and the immense privilege I feel being able to live and work and serve here in South Africa. With people who come from so many backgrounds and traditions, and many of whom, of course, were involved in the liberation struggle. So they have their stories, their lives. These people who are literally walking their talk remain such powerful, powerful teachers to me, and I'm humbled and inspired almost on a daily basis. There was one such that I met last year through the Parliament of the World's Religions, a beautiful woman known as Sister Letta, L-E-T-T-A. And Sister Letta, I can send a link via perhaps John or Sonia to her interview on the Parliament of the World's Religions. I was involved in the African synopsis of that, symposium, sorry. And she talked about two things. She talked about her own extraordinary life of being a devoted and lifelong Catholic, in so much so that obviously she took a vow and devoted her entire life, adult life, to being a sister in the Catholic order. And was based mostly up in the northeast of the country in South Africa, near Johannesburg. But she also as she was training to be a psychotherapist and did her master's in this, began to, as always the case when one studies something in great depth, things began to touch her and challenge her, and she began to think, how do I, as an African, a Black African, I believe some of her roots were Zulu, how do I align that with my deep faith in Catholicism and being of service in that way? And she went and has been on a tremendous journey in that regard. And where she was a powerful teacher for me is the three things that she and I talked about at length last year. She talked about the need to decolonize the psyche, especially for people who had been colonized, or people such as African Americans whose legacy and ancestry is involved and deeply embedded in the history of slavery. How do we decolonize our psyche? She also said that she saw a similarity in her understanding of, for example, people would say, you can't be a Sangoma, they would say. And a Sangoma is someone who practices ritual and spiritual practices in the African tradition. You can't do that, they would say, if you are a Catholic nun. And she said, but wait a second, you're asking me to pray to saints who are long dead, and you're asking me to identify with them and believe that they will listen to me and guide me, but I can't talk to my own ancestors. And it was a powerful challenge to her order and to the sense of her own Catholic identity. And so she spent her entire life allowing herself to move between those two worlds and seeing how one informed the other, and one allowed her to be deeply African as well as deeply Catholic. And the last thing that she and I spent a long time talking about was, she said, we as especially Black Africans, and I know that this is something that is shared around the world by so many who've suffered so much, said, we need to fall in love with ourselves. We need to reclaim that love that is our entitlement and shake off the heavy mantle of shame. Let me just read a couple of lines that she said in her interview in the Parliament of the World's Religions. I can understand in the Western culture that the individual takes the center because everything else is based on the philosophy of the importance of the individual. For us, as Africans and South Africans, Ubuntu says, I am because you are. So it cannot be my problem alone. It's our problem. What I'm going through is our problem, not my problem. And so if you don't involve the family, both living and dead, then you are isolating me from all this support system that can help me in my journey of my life. And that connects so beautifully with the book that I have been loving and relishing in these past few days and weeks. Cole Arthur Riley's book. And if those of you are interested, and again, I can send more details later, but she's worked on a beautiful project called Black Liturgies. And she says it's a project seeking to integrate the truths of dignity, lament, rage, and justice, and reclaiming a spirituality without shame, and one that allows a young Black poet and author as herself to be herself spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. I didn't finish my introduction fully because I neglected to tell you that the reason she became such an inspiration to me, and by she, I mean Sister Letta, is I discovered very recently that she lost her battle with cancer and has passed away. But she left, in my opinion, such a tremendous legacy. And as I say, she's one of the people who has impacted me the most greatly here since I've been in South Africa, because I resonate deeply with what she's saying about, especially the decolonization of the psyche and around dignity and shame. So I'm dedicating this next part to her. I have her photo even on my laptop. I see her every day. I'm going to keep it there just to, every time I see her, say thank you. So Sister Letta, if you're listening, because I'm pretty sure you are, thank you for inspiring me and thank you for being part of today. So it's very apropos that I would jump into chapter 1 and just pull 2 or 3 things that I think you would probably love and enjoy about what Cole Arthur Riley has written and shared around the theme of dignity. And she said, as I'm sure will resonate with many of us, that growing up, when she was told as a Christian, you were born in the image of God, and yet was shown a picture of an older white male, she said, how can that be? So she struggled, of course, with that. And then she said that when she took her imagination to the other end of the spectrum, she thought, goodness, that means I've got a million eyes and a million different faces, and that freaked her out too. So she was struggling with this whole idea of image and what it meant to be a reflection of the divine. Well, in her discovery, of course, she learned as a young woman what many of us are learning and still grappling with and still embracing in our own lives and our own understanding of our place in the world, and that's around diversity. And I love what she said. Let me quote very quickly. She said, God's wholeness is in a multitude. I thought, yes, perfect. So I want to just quote very quickly something that jumped out at me, and I thought, rather than try and put it in my words, why not just keep it in hers? And as I said, from chapter 1 on dignity. I do find it peculiar that humans have come to wield this over the rest of creation as though somehow we are superior. And by that she means, of course, we're born in the image of God. I don't believe this to be the case. Sometimes I wonder if we knelt down and put our ear to the ground, it would whisper up to us and say, yes, you were made in the image of God, but God made you of me, of course, being the earth. We've grown numb to the idea that we ourselves are made of dust, mysteriously connected to the goodness of the creation that surrounds us. Perhaps the more superior we believe ourselves to be to creation, the less like God we become. But if we embrace shalom, the idea that everything is suspended in a delicate balance between the atoms that make me and the tree and the land and the sky, if we embrace the beauty of all creation, we find our own beauty magnified. And what is shalom but dignity stretched out like a blanket over the cosmos? That's why it had to be her words, not mine. She said, and I resonated with this also, you don't give dignity, you affirm it. You don't give dignity, you affirm it. She also challenged the idea that sometimes we dignify with those, with what people do. We tend to entwine our concept of dignity with how much a person does. But she said, what of the sick? What of the elderly, the disabled, those on the fringes, those who are not normal, don't fit in? What of them? She said, therefore, it's not what we do. Dignity, of course, is in our being. And of course, as a young Black woman, how powerful is that realization and how liberating. And she did a beautiful expose on the Garden of Eden, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, except to say this. Of course, they're running around, having the freedom of the garden, enjoying the beauty of life in an uncomplicated way. But then, of course, came in touch with shame around that whole story. We don't need to unpack it. But I do love the way she said, instead of God calling Adam and Eve out from behind the trees and saying, oh, come on, stop being silly. It's not about shame. Just get over yourselves. She said, and let me quote her again, God went to great lengths to help them stand unashamed. And may we, in all that we do, all that we say, all that we are, may we ourselves mirror the same for ourselves and for the other, affirming the dignity in the other and realizing that all of life and spirituality, however that is or isn't defined for us, is there to make us stand unashamed. I want to close. As you can see, I've done the sermon into 3 parts, and this is the final segment. And as I said, I've skipped forward now to chapter 15, which Cole Arthur Riley called Liberation, and to share a couple of very profound thoughts that I certainly have enjoyed, and I hope that they're a takeaway for you also. In that chapter, she talks at length that liberation is not a finality or an end point. She said it's an unending awakening, an unending awakening. And how does one become attuned to it, is what she asks. And the chapter seems to come up with this answer, which is, what sounds are driving it out? Let me share a couple of words for you. Many of us end up surrendering a spirituality that allows us to be curious and uncertain and free, so that we can maintain some semblance of belonging, even if that means we adhere to a way of life that doesn't have room for the truth of us. She says, whenever I become certain of which direction liberation lies in, I ask myself to tell the truth. Not that I'm capable of comprehending what any ultimate truth is, but I am capable of at least telling the truth about what I believe to be true. My inmost convictions, my desires, or even an embodied revelation, the truth that rattles in my bones. She goes on to say that for her, liberation is not about necessarily only enlightenment or only education, but, she said, by doing our best at telling the truth, so that we can travel safely into what we really think and what we really feel, into our true selves and our essence. And with that, let me close with these few short words. Rest your souled body with another sacred body and tell each other the truth. Your dignity cannot be chained. Amen. And thank you, everybody.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, Subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.